My family told me I was born to take care of my brother, but when they came back after 6 years asking for $15,000 to get him out of legal trouble, my answer destroyed them, and now they say I'm selfish. I'm 24 years old. I work in digital marketing, and I need to get this story off my chest because honestly, it took years to understand that what I lived through wasn't normal, that it wasn't my responsibility to fix everything, and that it's okay to have left my family behind. The thing is, I grew up being basically invisible. And when I say invisible, I don't mean they completely ignored me, but that everything in my life revolved around my older brother Marcus and his needs, and I only existed as a function of him. I guess I should start from the beginning so all of this makes sense. Marcus is 4 years older than me and has ADHD, which, is valid and all that, but my parents used it as an excuse to justify literally every horrible thing he did. I don't remember a single moment from my childhood where I was the center of attention in a positive way, honestly. All my memories are tainted by Marcus, ruining everything, or my parents excusing him because supposedly he couldn't control his behavior. And look, I understand that ADHD is real and requires support, but what my parents did was basically allow him to be a bully without consequences because it was easier to give in than to discipline him. For as long as I can remember, Marcus bothered me constantly. He'd take my toys and break them, come into my room and destroy my things, push me, insult me, and when I complained to my parents, they'd say things like, "Your brother can't help it," or, "You need to be more understanding. You're the younger brother and you need to support him," as if being 4 years younger gave me some kind of superpower to put up with his shit without complaining. I remember being like 6 or 7 years old and thinking something was wrong with me because I couldn't just let Marcus treat me that way, without feeling bad. Birthdays were the worst. Every year, without fail, Marcus found a way to ruin my birthday. One year, I think when I turned 9, my parents had bought me a new bike, like one of those BMX ones I'd been asking for months, and I was so excited when I saw it in the yard. But Marcus had a tantrum because according to him, the bike was better than his. So, my parents basically spent the rest of my birthday consoling him while I stood there with my half-eaten cake, wondering why it always ended up like this. In the end, they bought him a new bike too, more expensive than mine, and I had to pretend I was happy for him so the drama would end. Can you believe it? On my own birthday, I had to celebrate my brother getting something better than me. But what really made me understand that my parents didn't see this as a problem was when I turned 13. I'd been saving my Christmas and birthday money for like 2 years because I wanted to go to Disneyland. It was the only thing I asked for. My parents finally agreed to take me. Just the 3 of us. Because Marcus was 17 and was supposedly going to stay with my aunt that weekend. I was so excited, you know? It was going to be 2 full days where I was the priority, where we could do the things I wanted without Marcus ruining everything. The day of the trip came, and we were literally loading the suitcases into the car when Marcus came out of the house, crying and screaming that he wanted to go too, that it wasn't fair to leave him out. All that shit. And my parents, instead of telling him no, that this was my trip, they just let him come. They didn't even ask me if I was okay with it. They just said, "Get in the car, Marcus," and that was it. I spent the entire trip in silence in the back seat, while Marcus rode up front, choosing the music and complaining about everything. At Disneyland, it was even worse. Every ride I wanted to go on, Marcus said it was boring or that he wanted to do something else. And my parents always gave in. We ended up basically doing what he wanted. And when I tried to complain, my mom told me, "Don't be selfish. Marcus deserves to have fun too." On my trip. The trip I'd been planning for 2 years. I remember being in line for Space Mountain, which was the one thing I was really excited about, and Marcus started saying he felt dizzy and that we needed to leave the park immediately. My parents panicked and we left. I never got on that ride. Turns out Marcus just wanted to leave so he could play video games at the hotel. He wasn't dizzy or anything, just bored. That night, I cried in the hotel bathroom for like an hour, and my parents didn't even notice. Or maybe they did and didn't care. I don't know. But what I do know is that something changed in me that day. I stopped expecting things to get better. I stopped believing that someday my parents would see me as something more than Marcus's brother, the one who had to adapt, the one who had to understand. The next few years were more of the same but worse, because Marcus was getting older and his behaviors were becoming more intense. He'd steal money from my room, use my things without permission, and return them broken. Walk in when I was changing just to bother me. My parents kept up with the same old story, that I had to be patient, that Marcus needed support, that it was my responsibility as a brother to be understanding. It was never their responsibility to control Marcus or protect me. It was always my responsibility to put up with it. When I got to high school, I started planning my escape. I didn't think of it that way at the time, but looking back, that's exactly what I was doing. I researched universities that were as far away as possible from my city, looked for scholarships, worked part-time to save money. My parents thought I was being ambitious or something, but the truth is, I just wanted to put thousands of miles between Marcus and me. I wanted a life where I didn't have to be constantly on alert waiting for him to ruin something, where I could just exist without having to accommodate another person's needs all the time. When I was 17 and applying to universities, I was super excited because I'd gotten an interview for a full scholarship at a university on the West Coast, literally across the country. I told my parents, expecting them to be proud or at least happy for me, but their reaction was completely different. They sat down with me in the kitchen, both of them with those serious faces they'd put on when they were going to tell me something important, and what they said basically destroyed any illusion I still had about my place in the family. My dad was direct. He said, "We need to talk about your future and Marcus's." And I thought it was going to be the typical conversation about family responsibility or something like that, but no. My mom took my hand, like trying to be comforting, I guess, and told me, "When we decided to have you, it was because Marcus needed a brother who could take care of him when we weren't around anymore. You understand that, right?" I sat there processing what I'd just heard. It wasn't that they had me because they wanted me or because they wanted another child. They had me specifically to be Marcus's caretaker. That was my purpose, my reason for existing in their minds. My dad continued explaining that they expected me to go to a local university, live at home, and eventually become responsible for Marcus when they got older. They talked about this like it was the most natural thing in the world, as if I'd signed some contract before being born, agreeing to be my brother's permanent babysitter. They said going so far away for college was selfish and that I had to think about the family first. I asked them, what about my dreams? What about what I wanted for my life? And my mom literally told me, sometimes we have to sacrifice what we want for the people we love. As if I hadn't been sacrificing things my entire damn life. That conversation was the confirmation I needed that I couldn't stay. It wasn't paranoia or exaggeration. They really saw me only as a resource for Marcus, not as a person with my own life and aspirations. I left that kitchen and called my paternal grandparents, who had always been more understanding with me. I told them everything, and they got really angry with my parents. My grandmother told me they were going to help me, not to worry about the money, that they'd cover what the scholarships didn't reach. When I told my parents that I was going anyway, that my grandparents were going to help me, they got furious. My dad yelled at me that I was ungrateful, that after everything they'd done for me, I was abandoning them. My mom cried and said I was destroying the family. Marcus, of course, had an epic meltdown, broke things in the house, blamed me for ruining his life. It was a total disaster, but I'd already made the decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't sacrifice my entire life for someone who had never treated me with a minimum of respect. I left for college 3 months after graduating from high school. My grandparents helped me with the move because my parents refused. They didn't come to see me off at the airport, didn't wish me luck, nothing. They cut off all communication with me, took me off the family cell phone plan, stopped paying for the insurance on the car that was technically theirs, basically erased me. And you know what? It hurt, but it was also liberating in a way. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about Marcus. I didn't have to walk on eggshells to avoid my parents getting upset. I could just be me. College was difficult because I had to work practically full-time while studying to cover expenses. But honestly, they were the best years of my life up to that point. I made friends who knew nothing about my family history, who knew me just as me, not as Marcus's brother. I went out on weekends without having to let anyone know where I was, or worry about coming home and finding some drama waiting for me. I started therapy at the University Counseling Center. which was eye-opening because the therapist helped me understand that what I lived through was emotional neglect and that it wasn't normal or acceptable. I graduated 2 years ago, got a decent job in digital marketing, moved to a city I love, and basically built the life I always wanted. I talk to my grandparents regularly. They come visit me or I go see them during vacations. I haven't spoken to my parents or Marcus in 6 years. 6 years of peace, of living for myself, of not having to constantly be in survival mode. But like 2 months ago, I received an email from my mom. I don't know how she got my work email. Probably my grandparents gave it to her accidentally or she found it on LinkedIn. I'm not sure. The email was long and basically said that Marcus had had some problems and that they needed my help. Turns out Marcus, who's now 28, was arrested because he was harassing some neighborhood kids. Yeah, you read that right, harassing children. Apparently he'd been following some kids who were like 10 or 11 years old, taking pictures of them, trying to talk to them when they were alone. The kids' parents realized it, called the police, and Marcus was arrested. My mom in the email was trying to minimize it, saying Marcus didn't understand social boundaries and that he didn't have bad intentions, that it was all a misunderstanding. But then she admitted that Marcus needed intensive therapy and possibly a lawyer, and that they couldn't afford all of that alone. The part that really made me angry was when she wrote, "I know we've been distant, but he's your brother and family supports each other in difficult times. We need you to contribute financially for his legal expenses and treatment." Not a, "How have you been?" Not a, "Sorry for how we treated you." Just directly asking for money. I read that email like 5 times trying to process the audacity. 6 years without talking to me, 6 years where they basically acted like I didn't exist, and now that Marcus is in serious trouble, suddenly, I'm family again, and I'm supposed to pull out my wallet. I forwarded the email to my therapist, and we had an emergency session because, honestly, it destabilized me quite a bit. Part of me felt guilt. That kind of programmed guilt from years of being told my responsibility was to take care of Marcus. But the more rational part of me knew this wasn't my problem, and that helping would be like validating all the abuse I lived through. It took me like a week to respond. I wrote and deleted like 20 different versions of the email. In the end, I kept it short and direct. Something like, "I received your email. I'm sorry Marcus is going through this, but I'm not going to contribute financially or in any other way. I wish you all the best." I didn't go into details, didn't explain my reasons, didn't open any door for additional conversation. I just made it clear I wasn't going to get involved. My mom responded immediately with another, much more aggressive email saying I was selfish. How could I turn my back on my brother when he needed me most? That she knew I had a good job and could help. She mentioned that my grandparents had poisoned my mind against the family and that someday I was going to regret it. That part made me laugh, honestly, because my grandparents never said anything bad about my parents in front of me. They just supported me and let me make my own decisions. If anyone poisoned anything, it was my own parents with their actions. I didn't respond to that second email. I blocked my mom's email, blocked their phone numbers, blocked Marcus on all the social media I hadn't blocked him on before. I asked my grandparents not to share any information about me with my parents, and they understood and respected that. I basically closed any communication channel that could exist. Later, I found out through my grandparents, because they do maintain some minimal contact with my parents, that Marcus ended up accepting a deal with the prosecutor's office. He has to attend mandatory therapy for 2 years, do community service, and he has a restraining order that prohibits him from approaching the neighborhood kids. He didn't go to prison, but he was registered on some kind of watch list. My parents are apparently furious with me because, according to them, if I had helped with the legal expenses, they could have gotten a better lawyer who would have avoided all that. As if it were my fault that Marcus decided to harass children, as if everything was still my responsibility to fix. What bothers me most is that my parents clearly haven't learned anything. They still see Marcus as a victim of circumstances, instead of as someone who needs to be held accountable for his actions. They still expect everyone else to adapt to him, instead of demanding that he change. And they still see me only as a resource they should be able to access when they need it, not as a person with my own life and boundaries. I've had moments where I wonder if I did the right thing, if I should have at least tried to help in some way. The guilt is hard to shake, especially when it was implanted in you from such a young age. But then I talk to my therapist or my friends, and they remind me that protecting myself isn't selfishness, that I have no obligation to sacrifice my well-being for someone who never treated me well. And they're right. I know it rationally, but there are still days where I feel bad. What I do know for certain is that I don't regret leaving. My life now is completely different from what it would have been if I'd stayed. I have a career I like, friends who genuinely support me, an amazing partner I met last year who comes from a functional family and shows me how family love is supposed to be. I'm planning a trip to Europe for next summer, something I always wanted to do and that I can now afford because I work hard and manage my money well. I go to therapy regularly and I'm processing all the trauma from my childhood in a healthy way. Sometimes it makes me sad to think about what could have been if my parents had been different. If Marcus had received appropriate help from a young age instead of just being enabled. But I can't change the past. I can only control my present and my future. And I've decided that my future doesn't include being anyone's caretaker but my own for now. Last week, my grandmother called me and told me that my parents asked her if I was going to the Christmas dinner this year. They told her that enough time had passed and that it was time to leave the past behind and be a family again. My grandmother told them that wasn't her decision and that they'd have to ask me directly. They haven't, probably because they know what my answer would be. I'm not going to any family dinner. I'm not going to pretend everything's okay. I'm not going to subject myself again to that toxic dynamic where my needs are secondary to Marcus's. I'll spend Christmas with my partner and their family. People who treat me with genuine love and respect, who ask me how I am and really care about the answer. And that's enough for me. More than enough, honestly. I've built my own chosen family, one that's based on mutual respect and real affection, not on obligations and manipulation. I don't know what's going to happen with Marcus long term, or if my parents will eventually understand the damage they caused. Part of me hopes that someday they'll recognize what they did wrong, that they'll offer me a sincere apology, but I'm not actively waiting for that or conditioning my happiness on it happening. I've learned that you can't force people to change or see things differently. You can only control your own actions and reactions. For now, I'm focused on continuing to build the life I want, on healing from the years of emotional neglect, on establishing healthy boundaries and maintaining them. Some days are harder than others, especially when things like that email from my mom pop up that remind me of everything I lived through. But I've reached a point where I can process those emotions without letting myself be dragged back into that dynamic. I can feel sadness or anger about what happened without feeling obligated to do something about it. My therapist told me something a few months ago that stuck with me. She said that loyalty to yourself isn't selfishness, it's survival. And that choosing your own peace over family chaos doesn't make you a bad person, it makes you a person who finally learned their worth. That's what I try to remember when guilt tries to creep in. I didn't abandon my family, I saved myself. And that's okay. More than okay. It was absolutely necessary.